ladies and gentlemen. So for the next session, I'm going to shift from being the introducer to the moderator. The UAE is a global hub for world-class experiences, but we need to ask, what does it take to keep attendees and workers safe in these high-pressure environments? You know, we've got some large-scale music events and festivals and cultural gatherings here, international expos like this one, and the UAE really has become a hub for world-class experiences. Now, to discuss raising the bar of event safety, I'm not just pleased, I'm excited to be joined by two leaders in the field, and I'm proud to actually say that these two gentlemen are my friends. Scott Anderson, founder and CEO of International Event Security. Scott, if you'd like to come up. And Gareth Thomas, founder and managing director of Health and Safety Emirates. Gentlemen, welcome. Are you comfortable, Gareth? As comfortable as you can be.
Yep.
Which is probably not very comfortable. So, while we're settling down, I've kind of got a question for you. Did you realise that the UAE is a global hub for the events industry? Or this region is, in fact. I think Scott, Gareth and myself have worked in events and entertainment between us, and bearing in mind I'm a very old man, we've probably got more than 80 years experience, and we've worked globally. So this is the way that the events industry has taken off in the region has brought in a lot of talented people, and I'm really, really honoured to say that these two gentlemen are some of those talented people. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, maybe take a minute and give us an introduction into who you are. I'll start with you, if that's okay, please, Gareth.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name's Gareth. I've got a company called Health Safety Emirates. We are specifically in the niche of high-risk events and film production. So we will cover risk across the whole spectrum of a film. That will be from the absolute onset and helping design the ecosystem that we put down, to then also being very much the response arm of that production. And that response arm is through medical, through having the right safety people, through security, and through fire. We have been operating here now for 15 years, but as a family, I'm proud to say we've been here for 50 years.
Thank you. And Scott, you've been here about 5 years, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay? Yeah, great. So my name is Scott Anderson. I'm the CEO of International Event Security. I set it up here in Dubai 4 years ago. We've also got a European branch based in Rome. And I guess our expertise is focused on the strategic vision, tactical planning, and then the operational leadership of major events. So that's predominantly in the festival, live music, sporting, high-profile corporate clients. So we try to build our teams and implement them right at the feasibility stage, build the relationships with the public security stakeholders, ensure that we're operating inside all of the regulatory frameworks all across the world. And then we arrive on site, we grab our radios, and we lead our local security teams, and we motivate and inspire, and we deliver them. So that's, I guess, the main role, and I guess like all of us, what we try to do is, in our roles, is implement and nurture a healthy safety and security culture. I know that's a real big one, is implementing that in our teams, making sure that everybody can enjoy their vocation, and that we can get health and safety and security embedded into culture.
I was going to move on, but you've said something really interesting, so I'm going to stay on that point. One of the things that happens really well in the world that, you know, Gareth, Scott and myself operate in, is that the boundary between security, safety, counter-terrorism, fire safety, it's very blurred, and we all work together closely. But I think for the first part of our discussion, I want to look at and discuss the cost of and operational benefits of being involved at for us being involved in an event at the concept stage versus that last minute culture where we get a phone call on a Friday and say there's an event on Sunday, can you deploy a team? And that makes it so difficult for us. So Scott, I'm going to come to you initially. You just mentioned you have a framework, a strategic vision, a tactical methodology for operational delivery. Can you explain why bringing security and safety in at this strategic vision stage, that early phase of planning, the bit where we're sitting alongside the finance people, and how that can save money and improve the creative process, but also make the event safer?
I'll give it a go. I guess there's two aspects. One aspect is that the misconception that when you bring security in at an earlier stage, that it's going to cost a lot more, and I can talk about that. The other one is that if you don't bring security in right at the early stage, it's late, and I'm sure we've all had instances in our careers where we faced that when you bring security controls in late, it costs a lot more because you're reactive and it's not integrated into the plan. So I guess the first aspect around the misconception, we just to use a very clear example, we wrote a security strategy for one of the biggest festival promoters in the world, and that was 8 pages. So if you're doing an event, your security strategy can easily be 1 page, right? It's not a lengthy process that we have to go through. It can be very easily captured, probably on 2 sides of 1 A4, but then that informs the entire process that you've got going through there. When you bring security in right at the early stage, you change that. You stop being a blocker, you become an enabler, right? You're able to integrate security into the design. You can improve the event process for, I guess, not just your ticket buyers, but also the entire ecosystem. Contractors, suppliers, your staff, they all need to go through the security system themselves. I've been on lots of events where we've been perhaps late opening doors because F&B have taken a lot of time to get searched. They've been in queues. Straight away they're behind the game and they're not focused on generating revenue. So when you bring the security in there, integrate it into the design, you're able to plan all of those processes that make the ecosystem enter and work quickly. And then from your ticket buyers, you're able to inform their event journey. So you're able to give them a much better experience. You're able to ensure that they can arrive quicker, that they can enter the event quicker, that they've got less touch points. And all of that has a direct impact on secondary spend. And that's not just Scott Anderson saying that, that's proven through data and analysis that when you're a happy customer, you come into the event, you spend more in merchandising, you spend more in food and beverage, you feel happier, you promote the event more, and it becomes a lot easier for the event to make a lot more profitable. So that often offsets that. I hope that answers.
That's a very good answer. And you two, please don't groan. One of my biggest bugbears about the events industry, and I talk about this a lot, it's failing to engage with us, the safety and security professionals, early enough, and things around contractor management and supplier management. There are so many times where we join an event and we start to ask the basic questions. Have you looked at your suppliers? Have you looked at your contractors? Have you done due diligence on them? And invariably, the answer tends to be no. That then takes up more time. That is where the costs rise. And that's why people have this perception that sometimes that safety and security can be expensive. But Scott's absolutely right. If you engage us early and make us part of the creative process, I love that statement. I'm going to keep that one. I think this is how that we can be most beneficial to an event. Gareth, I think you and I have had some moments over the past couple of years where, we've both been on the end of that last minute phone call culture. Can we have 3 guys tomorrow? And we haven't even had a time to consider the risks. So Gareth, from your experience, What are the real operational safety and cost consequences of this last minute approach compared to being embedded early in the planning process?
Well, I think the first thing is that when you get those phone calls, it tells you quite a lot about the clients. It tells you that they haven't really considered risk within their whole operational delivery. It tells you that they may have priced a job aggressively in order to win the business and therefore, again, not considered it. Or alternatively, it might tell you that there's this idea of an optimism bias because it's never happened to them before. Or they've got into this sort of normalization of deviance where they have deviated from best practice to something that has just managed to deliver, and that's become the new baseline. So when I do get those phone calls, and I had one recently where somebody asked me for a medic with a spinal board. And I had to ask the question, well, why is there a need for a spinal board? What's the activity? They then went on to tell me that what the activity was, it was some precision driving, and as a result, someone had suggested they may need a spinal board. So I then asked the next question, had it been assessed? Has the activity been assessed? And that was a clear no. Is there an ambulance already being considered? No. So their idea to that response was purely a medic with a spinal board because it ticked some box for them in terms of compliance, but actually didn't meet the real necessity that would be needed, the real delivery of a response should something occur. And if you look at what is the cost of that, aside of the cost of the individual that may be injured, the reputational cost to the studio, there are massive lawful implications that come with that. Here we are, as owners of production companies, we are the gatekeepers of safety, but we're also lawfully culpable. We can't transfer that liability, that negligence. But quite often I feel that the people that are making that phone call are very naive to all of those things. And now they just need a quick fix because perhaps an insurer has told them it's required, or perhaps a client has requested it, but they don't truly understand why. And then in that situation, we aren't there to manage risk. We're simply there to respond to bad planning. And when we respond to bad planning, it means that the opportunity for an incident is far greater, and the results of that incident can be a lot more severe.
I think that piece around being reactive and proactive, the three of us are very much want to be proactive, but we often find that we're reactive. Gareth, you said a couple of things there that are interesting, but do you see a difference between your more established clients, and I know you have some very famous clients, some big clients. Do you see a difference in the approach from the established clients and the less mature clients?
Well, I think our more mature clients have learned from risk. They've got learned risk within their framework. They've been through situations where, as a result, their safety frameworks have been re-engineered. They are very, very much aware of the cost of an incident. And also, as a result, understand that the investment made at the very beginning, being part of that planning, will help mitigate that opportunity. And that means when we're looking at a script, when we're looking at day shoots and night shoots and how we actually plan that script and the production delivery around our sessions, how the crew are going to live, what they're doing outside of filming times in terms of where we put them. That whole ecosystem is very much planned from A to Z. And with the more mature clients, that is something that is insisted on from the very beginning. The next trick is to get the servicing production companies to do the same.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I find working with the bigger production companies, the more mature companies, is that they understand the requirement for safety and security to meet, and the value in doing that. But I think one of the things that I respect you two absolutely hugely, but one of the things that you two are both guilty of is because you're so good at what you do, I suggest that some of your clients know that you can solve problems really, really quickly, and they lean into you to do that without actually realizing the pressure that puts you under. Scott, you and I have been in some circumstances like that. And Gareth, I have to say, honestly, I personally have put you in that position very, very recently. I hope you can all see that what I want to do over the next 30 minutes is get across to you that the process around events and entertainment is no different to if you're working in manufacturing and construction. I think one of the things that we have to be is that we have to be more flexible in our approach. And I think the thing that's coming across already is that we have a broad knowledge across each of our specialist areas. So I want to look at something very specific, the regional challenges around fire and medical response. And Gareth, I'm going to come back to you because I know that you've been involved heavily in the rewriting of the fire regulations for the region. But Scott, from your perspective in the UAE, kind of emergency response often requires a collaboration of private security providers and government agencies. Now, from your experience, how do you practically bridge that gap? Because you're the guy in the middle to ensure everyone operates as one coordinated unit rather than working in silos, especially when time and that principal authority and command structure, just as we go into the example you gave, into doors open, and we've got that initial confusion.
Yeah, that's a great question, Rick. I think my company, we operate all across the world. We operate on multiple continents. We're working with a lot of different stakeholders. And I always tell my team that no matter where we are guests, right? We're in somebody else's house, and we need to play by their rules. And I think that, especially here in the UAE, there needs to be a recognition that private security is not operating alongside the security forces, government agencies. It's operating within the national security system. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you build those relationships? I will probably sound like a broken record, but it comes back to having a strategic, tactical, and operational outlook on it. And so from the strategic part, it's about getting early engagement with all of the stakeholders, agreeing roles, responsibilities, escalation thresholds, ensuring that there's a clear documented agreement, memorandum of understanding, if you like, and a transparent agreement about the strategic overlay of the event. Then it comes down into taking that strategy and the objectives, the planning assumptions, the principles that you looked at, factor in that tactical plan, putting that together, that then delivers the strategic objectives. So I guess from a tactical point, we'll ensure that we extend invitation to everybody to come to our planning meetings. People always can't attend, so we'll make sure we distribute the minute meetings. We'll ask for joint site walkthroughs, make sure that we get early agreement on emergency access routes, have our plan, make sure that it's collaborative. That's very, very important. I think quite often people will just try and present the finished plan, right? And in this region, that's not the way to go about it. It's about being collaborative, engaging, inviting feedback, and then critically, when you invite the feedback, you have to listen to it, and you have to incorporate that into how you're putting your plans together. Once you've gone through the tactical planning stages, you can do things like operationally making sure that the representatives have been briefed, that you perhaps shared a briefing pack with them, that you've given them the site overlays, that you've agreed all of the decision-making hierarchy that needs to happen at the event. Is there participation from them in event command and control? And then I think once you start to agree strategically, tactically deliver it through planning, put in operational processes and systems that then deliver your tactical plan. And I guess one part that is exceptionally important is communicating that in a way that is culturally sensitive and that it's appropriate. I won't name any names, but sometimes I've been to multi-agency meetings and I see people come in and they're wearing shorts and t-shirt and sunglasses and it looks like they've just been to the gym or they're going for a day on the beach. You know, you should be approaching multi-agency meetings as a way of building that trust. And you can only build that trust by being credible. Okay, and I think everybody here in the room will have their own favorite providers.
Of course.
If I asked you why are they your favorite providers, I'm fairly sure the answer would be because we trust them. And it's exactly the same in the UAE. That's what government agencies, that's what local police forces are looking for. They're looking for people with trust, people who understand that transparency, discipline, communication matter just as much as your ability and the qualifications that you've had.
We could stay on this subject for a while, but we need to keep moving forward. That's great. Thank you, Scott. Qualifications. Gareth, I've been remiss. Congratulations on your master's and on starting your doctorate. Well done, sir.
Well done.
Gareth, you've also, you're very respected in the region because of your input into the changes in the fire regs, specifically relating to the events industry and more specifically in film and TV. I guess we could talk about that for a while, but I guess from what I'd like to know from a UAE context around emergency response, how do the response plans that we prepare pre-event on paper, how do they actually translate into the real world when we go live? Or do they actually translate?
I think there's a stage before that. I think if you look at the relationship that we have with, say, for example, a film production, a film is delivered through a local servicing production company, but there are a number of key stakeholders that sit behind that. And so you find yourself in this tri-party agreement almost, where you might have a studio that could, let's say, be in the States. You'll have a production company that is from the UK, for example, and then here locally, we're delivering it. So what might be standard delivery in one region is very different to what is our standard of delivery here. And so from that, we have this, if you like, glocalization. And what that means is that we want to be able to deliver global benchmark standards, but be locally centric. A UAE-centric plan, one that works specifically to the region that we're in effectively. And when you're in a remote location, that is so completely different to what is expected. And whilst you may have a risk assessment that will put in control measures to try and mitigate those hazards, you may have a method statement that will discuss the operational methodology of delivering. All that is well, but unless you have on the ground the competency to be able to respond to a change in those assumptions, to a change in the dynamic, to a change in what is expected, to be able to deliver in real time, then problems will just flare up very, very fast. And for us, we just recently delivered a project where our medical solution was considered a little bit heavy, a little bit too much. And there was a real challenge around getting it live and getting it operational. But we eventually did. And as a result, we had a primary clinic that was sat out in the desert. We had doctors on set every day that were fantastic Imperial College trained doctors that were just delivering fantastic service thanks to Amara Healthcare. We had Medivac, we had 4x4 ambulances, we had rapid response vehicles, particularly for fire, where we could knock something very quickly over a landscape that would be from one location to another in the dunes, maybe 13 kilometers. So that whole infrastructure that you set up is critical. And whilst it was challenged at its inception, at the end of the job, we were congratulated on fighting for it because it was absolutely needed. And we saw that throughout the course of the work that we did.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you were so concerned about the fire response out in that remote location in the desert that you actually built a fire tender yourself?
Well, we put a rapid response vehicle out there. We were able on that to have 4,500 litres of foam to knock anything that was going to be there for what we would have. And that was something that hadn't been done before. Along with, as I say, the clinic that we put down there. In that we had a ward with 4 beds in. We were delivering IV therapy. We were able to collect bloods there. We were able to do a variety of different things that previously would have meant a 2.5 hour, 3 hour journey.
Do you know, I want to talk about how a drone could help with that, but we'll probably save that for another conversation. Something I do want to pick up on, Gareth, you and I specifically, you talked about that multinational approach. And I'm sure people at Apple TV wouldn't mind us talking about a project we worked on together. We were working closely with a risk manager based in California. And I know initially in our conversations, it was, how is this going to work? And actually, it worked really, really brilliantly because the risk manager in California allowed Gareth and myself to develop strategies to manage specific risk, particularly around motorsport in this particular instance. So that global approach did work because what that guy in California did, he took time to get to know us and he spent a lot of time talking to you specifically about fire risk. So we didn't have to go through that continuous knocking of heads. We don't do it this way in the UAE. We know you do it that way in California. And so I guess what I want to say is well managed, we can have really positive relationships. And it also gave Gareth an opportunity to show a production company based in the USA the quality of specifically around fire safety and medical response that's delivered in the UAE to productions when they come and they want to shoot in this region. So both of you knew at some point I was going to talk about the weather. Gareth, you and I had a pretty interesting storm experience about 12 months ago now. But Scott, you and I, our history goes back 15, 16 years. And you know, we can't change what's happening. And I know there are probably people sitting here that think what's happening to the weather is not climate change related. It's a natural occurrence. I heard recently that it's because the world has been knocked off its north-south axis by 5 degrees, and don't worry, it'll come back in line in about 10,000 years. But I can share from my experience over the last 30 years, until very recently, I can't remember a time where we absolutely stopped a show or an event because of the weather. Now, in the last 4 years, that's happened to me 5 times. And let's go back a little bit further. It's happened to me 6 times, 2 of those with Scott, 1 with Gareth. Now, weather changes in weather pattern affect us in so many ways in the events industry. So you know, regionally, when the temperature gets up to 50 degrees, there's a stop work. That for us in the events industry, particularly when we're hiring in equipment and we're hiring labor on a day rate, that has to be planned and prepared for. Some of you will have heard me speaking earlier, you know, about being prepared and planning for these changes. But I think one of the things I'd like to talk about, Scott, I'll come to you initially. When we're working in these really high temperatures, what do you do as an organization to change shift patterns and manage the welfare of your security team?
Well, I guess I'll start off by saying I'm from Northern Ireland, so wind and rain are coursing through my veins. So, inclement weather is something I grew up with. I remember being in Belfast airport once, and there was a flight cancellation, and everybody was groaning and moaning. And the guy beside me said that climate change is only a dream for the Irish. And I guess to your point, I know there is a lot of discussion around it. Whether it's, no matter what side of the fence you sit on, the thing that you cannot deny is that it has had a massive impact on events. And so it's a known risk. And what is our job? Our job is to mitigate known risks through the implementation of appropriate and proportionate control measures.
Yeah.
And so again, I'll come back to the very beginning, which is each of the threats and the risks need to have a strategic, tactical, and an operational plan in order to mitigate them. So with things like inclement weather, I don't think anybody could put forward a case to say that it's not proportionate and it's not appropriate to have an inclement weather strategy. So that strategy starts with setting out the key priorities. What are the key priorities? Quite often in events you hear the show must go on, the show must go on. For me, I would put life preservation, I would put crowd safety, shelter of the crowd, I would put critical infrastructure, and then I would put the show must go on. So for me, there's a lot of things that need to look at before we just say the show's going on. So having those set out in a strategic vision then informs the tactical planning. You give the scope for the event to be designed in a way that accommodates redundancy, that expects redundancy. In ingress systems, egress systems, transportation. I think especially in countries where heavy rainfall is not part of the daily occurrence, your planning can't then assume that the processes and systems will stand up. You have to assume that those processes and systems are going to degrade. And so your planning and your mitigation becomes not how you can prevent the inclement weather happening. It becomes about how you control and mitigate as best you possibly can the experience of the event. So like I said, that comes down to having the strategic vision. It then goes into the tactical planning. So is there a transfer of authority? Who has the ultimate responsibility to cancel the show? Who has the ultimate authority to stop the show? Who can restart the show? Do we evacuate? Do we evacuate? All of those aspects need to be documented. They need to be agreed, and all of the stakeholders should be sitting around the table agreeing, so that when it does happen, we don't have hesitation. Hesitation, I would say, probably without fear of contradiction, hesitation when you're dealing with an emergency situation is the biggest multiplier of risk. So having that strategic vision, agreed with the stakeholders, tactically fed through into the planning, and then delivered operationally. So we've got teams that when the rain starts to come, it'll come as no surprise to anybody here that people run for shelter. Where are the sheltered areas? How are we communicating to people where those sheltered areas are? How are we monitoring the capacity of those sheltered areas? How are we closing down those sheltered areas? And then where are we telling people to go to? So who's giving us that information? How are we having that into event command and control? There's an entire holistic plan around the mitigation of inclement weather, but it's just one of the risks that needs to be factored in through our threat and risk assessment, the objectives that we set, the training and performance management that we give to our teams.
Great response. Gareth, to wrap up, you and I had a particularly challenging experience at Yas Marina in 2024. We were filming there, and we had a heavy storm. And what actually happened there is, interestingly, I saw as an observer working closely with you that because you were the recognized authority with the knowledge of risk, you were the guy who was also providing the medical provision. What actually happened is the production team, and actually to an extent the circuit, defaulted to you, and you were under a huge amount of pressure. Can you talk about what that feels like as an event professional when you've got 50 people looking at you and going, well, Gareth, you're the guy with all the experience. How do we get out of this problem? You did it very well, by the way, but I'd just like you to share that with us.
I think quite often, our clients, they will plan for heat. It's quite obvious here. They tend to respond to rain and to sandstorms because it's never going to rain because of where we are. Also, when you've got a client who perhaps is, again, from the UK, where it rains pretty much every day, the idea of it going to rain tomorrow doesn't seem such a drama. That proved to be very different on that day. We were very much aware of what was coming in. We'd wrapped filming, so there wasn't a live shot. We'd got a lot of crew that were busy packing up gear. And when the rain comes down here, it can cause absolute torment. Floors get a lot greasier. Driving can be somewhat challenging. Our infrastructure sometimes struggles with particularly then the amount of water that was falling. And in those situations, I'm very much aware that I'm just not the guy with the know-how. I'm also culpable.
Yeah.
What happens from now to wrapping this up is on me. And that comes sometimes with a little bit of a fight, because if I choose to shut down a set, if I choose to shut down an operating area, that comes at a cost. And a cost that the client's got to bear. And when they've got plane tickets booked to get crew out, and all the other knock-on effects from delaying a wrap of a big show, whether it's a massive event or for us, a big film ecosystem, that decision-making sometimes gets taken from you in terms of the cost management. And you have to go back to the client and remind them that you're the one that's culpable, and that regardless of where this is going, it has to happen. So the pressure was absolutely on. What happened on that particular day, I mean, we had, I think, 88, I think we measured on the gust that came through. We had a tent lift, 20 by 40 tent lift. It was almost...
It didn't just lift, it was on the other side of the roadway.
So again, going back from those experiences, if you then take that and then put that out in the desert where you've got 400 or 500 crew, that you've now got to get back out of there in that type of situation, you've got to kick in very, very quickly, and you've got to be very confident with your response. And sometimes that comes with a little bit of push.
It does, and you're very good at doing that in a very, very polite way. I'd say that there's a Celtic influence on the stage. So Scots from Northern Ireland, Gareth and myself are Welsh, so we're very used to inclement weather. Although Gareth's been here most of his life. So that's the end of our session. I was going to tell you a story about how Scott and myself we didn't understand the authority that the New York City Council had, and we experienced an extreme weather event at an event in New York about 6 years ago now, and actually we lost control because the city came in and took over. The whole point of this discussion today is, if you plan in advance and you know who your stakeholders are, that doesn't happen. What I want to leave you with is kind of almost a question. Can you see the talent that you've got in your region in the events industry with these two guys? And I'm pretty sure you can, so I'd like a round of applause for them, please.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, man. It was great.